I far prefer the French approach to April Fools with their poisson d'avril, slap a paper fish on the back of an unsuspecting victim. Much like AppSec slaps a bunch of checklists on unsuspecting code. But maybe the joke's on us. After all, we still have CVEs week after week after week. Maybe it's the term AppSec itself. It starts with apps and whatever good intentions you might have, but it nevertheless always ends in C. Which means this week we talk with Eric Allard from SUSE about democratizing software security so that modern practices are available to everyone. In the news segment, the logic of attacking blast doors, springtime for RCE, a zlib patch finally appears, starting security for startups, verifying Rust code, and more. Distribute some poissons and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. It's the show to learn the latest tools, techniques, and processes necessary to understand DevOps, application security, and cloud security. Your trusted source for the latest application security news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. Imperva protects applications wherever they live and at the pace of development. From securing applications at runtime to protecting APIs in any cloud environment, only Imperva offers a unified solution across edge, application, and data to help you achieve more and save money. Start a free trial today and quickly protect your web applications at securityweekly.com/Imperva.
This is episode 191, recorded April 4th, 2022. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with Mr. John Kinsella. Hello, John.
Mr. Mike Shima, good to see you. I can't believe it's April already.
It is April already, and hopefully you flew through April 1st without any annoying, stupid jokes, and maybe something clever on your part.
One can dream.
Another thing, can dream. That sounds good. Something that isn't a joke is that, dear listeners, you can save $100 on your RSA Conference 2022 full conference pass. RSA will be live in San Francisco this June 6th through 9th. Security Weekly will be there in full force, delivering real-time, live coverage and interviewing some of the event's top speakers and sponsors. Register with our discount code by visiting securityweekly.com/RSA2022 and using the code 52UCyber. Hope to see you there. And of course, don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe on any of our podcast feeds and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, Discord server, and follow us on our social media and our streaming platforms. Eric Allard is the CTO at SUSE and is on a mission to make software safer for everyone. Eric brings more than 15 years of tech and entrepreneurial leadership to the SUSE team. Trained as a software engineer, he soon realized his true passion is anticipating customer needs and bringing solutions to market. He loves building and leading teams and is known for both his big picture strategic skills and his eye for detail. Eric's previous roles include startup founder, VP of R&D for My Web Grocer, and stay-at-home dad. Hello, Eric. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I don't know if I'm on a mission, but somebody liked the way that sounded, so I'll run with it.
Let's definitely run with it, because whether or not you threw that in there yourself or somebody else did, I think it sounds like a good mission to make software safer for everyone. And part of that is to dive into things like software composition analysis, SBOMs. But I think kind of the gist of what you've been focusing on is there's a big gap between something like a White House missive that says, yeah, maybe SBOMs are probably a good idea, or some security podcast saying everybody should have some type of SCA tool. Go check your dependencies. But then you've actually got to do the work. And it's that doing the work and the implementation that becomes pretty important, that we need to make it available for everyone. So I'm kind of curious, especially for you coming from an engineering background, what did you see as this, what were the engineering challenges you saw as opposed to just we should have a security checklist or we should do something more secure?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think tends to get missed is when you talk about tools and features, there's this broader, I think, lack of awareness that access is a feature, right? So how easy is it to get your tool, to use your tool? The title of this episode, right, we put democratize in there, and I didn't mean that from like a political perspective, not bringing democratic government. It means to bring something to all people, to make it available to all people, and to make it possible for all people to understand something. And to me, that's a big part of it's the challenge we need to really face from a cybersecurity perspective. People have this maybe big picture idea that, oh, security is important, but without making it simple and easy to get tools to people. And that's not just developers, although coming from an engineering background and working with a bunch of engineers, that's one of our focuses, but it's all stakeholders. You need to get this story across the business and out of the AppSec team or the engineering team.
Yeah, I think, and not to go into specifics of things like pricing in particular, but those are the types, of conversations that do start to happen as you talk about business. And I think there's some aspects of why should we do this, plus how much will it cost us, but less maybe not so much pricing specifically I'm going at there, but what are the trade-offs? What are our opportunity costs? Why should we do X instead of Y? Or, okay, we're supposed to do this, have this type of capability. Is it going to be easy or hard? What's the impact? And I'm curious too, from you working at startups and possibly talking with startups as well, or smaller customers, in that spirit of democratizing this for everyone, for teams that don't have massive budgets. How does that conversation evolve, both on the engineering side of things as well as the business side of things, to say this is actually something we can do that's pretty feasible, that's not going to disrupt a quarter's worth of engineering effort?
Yeah, exactly. Like, we can not talk about price. We can talk about open source solutions off the shelf, right? For example, that's something that's accessible from a price perspective. It probably doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the easiest thing to integrate and set up for your team. I'm not going to say that's exclusively true, but there's a number of barriers that I think, especially for small, medium-sized businesses and startups, cost is just one. How easy is this to use? You don't have every potential expert on your team when you're a small business, right? You have folks wearing lots of hats. So whatever tool you choose, it has to be something that you can actually accommodate within your skill set. As a former engineer and someone responsible for buying products, be that like developer-focused tools, like things that you would use day to day, like IDEs or developer enablement tools, there's a lot of complication in the market regarding how you shop for things and how you have to figure out what you can buy and what you need. So, what I think we're proposing is there really needs to be a rethink in the industry about how to reach businesses that aren't flush with cash and don't have every possible role filled to do some of this absolutely critical stuff. And I think it really is accessible. You just need to know where to look. Things like SCA and DAST, and these solutions are out there. The big players are doing more to enable that as well. I mean, GitHub has lots of tools that can help enable some of those capabilities and make it visible. But if you don't think about the big picture, you're going to get a patchwork of, be they cheap or expensive, tools that don't necessarily meet the needs of your business. And maybe the dirty secret, I was just going back to your previous episode 190 that you just published. There was some great discussion about who is it in your company that's really going to help make those decisions about what to fix from a security perspective. And I think you hit on the right answer. The product management and whoever fills that role at the company, be that someone that's technical because you're tiny, or it's a dedicated role or roles because you're bigger. It's a business decision. You need to get the right information in front of those people, because ultimately, if they don't understand why it's important, you're not going to be fixing those vulnerabilities. You're not going to be interrogating the profile of the open source licenses you're using and be saying, geez, should we really be pulling that in? Or should we be using this package as no contributors, or it hasn't been updated in 2 years or whatever. So I think having more people in the conversation is a big part of it. And making it easy for people to be part of that conversation is very critical.
So, what are some ways that you've seen to guide that conversation so that it becomes a fruitful one that has both the education aspect in case someone just isn't familiar? Well, I've heard about SCA or I've heard about SBOM, but sort of isn't SBOM something we just need to feed into our SCA tool so we know whether or not we're exposed to Log4j or whatever the latest Java vulnerability that we're worried about today. So kind of still picking along that thread as you're talking to product managers or the business decision makers, what are some ways you found really successful, or for that matter, some ways that some lessons learned to avoid in positioning things like SCA and SBOM so that they do have that quick grasp in that short bit of attention you might have for them to say, yes, this does make sense. We should invest in this, leading to that next part of how do we make this an easy investment?
Mm-hmm. I think the classic example is you can't manage what you can't measure. So you have to start somewhere. And the SBOM discussion is an interesting one because it's a little bit of a catch-22. We went to SBOMorama put on by CISA a few months ago. It was virtual, but
that's a great name.
Yes. But the catch-22 is, well, until enough people make these and understand their role, it's not that useful. There's a little bit of a network effect with SBOMs. Think about it this way. If you used Slack, it's not a very useful tool, right? But once you get adoption across the rest of your team and potentially with teams outside your business, suddenly, the communication stream is much more efficient. And then you can do things like chat ops because everyone's starting to leverage this tool. Mm-hmm. The same thing goes for an SBOM. If you're not creating one yourself and understanding what's in it and how consuming one of those could help you be a little more defensive before you use a new piece of software or add some device to your network, the network effect doesn't happen. So the short version of that is like, if you want to be part of the solution, and I think whether you want to or not, this is really what it's going to take for things to improve. We're all going to have to be part of the solution and start creating some of these key documents like an SBOM that we can use to disclose not only what we know about our software, but that we're also taking in to look at other people's software. And the way you do that is with an SCA solution. And there's a lot of these. There's free ones, there's enterprise level ones, but you need to start doing something. I can maybe kick that piece of the conversation to a little bit later, but I do think there's some misconceptions about how many people really are paying attention to this that is about to change because of not only government activity, but it's just such a common news thread. Week after week, we're seeing news stories about this stuff. But I think the time is near, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, especially week after week, I think we've covered a handful of NPM specifically, just to pick on one package, one language, but it's not a unique problem to NPM by any means. So maybe pulling on that thread, in fact, be curious to hear more about what you've seen in terms of triggering more of this network effect or trying to build up this network effect, because I imagine there's this aspect of we need an SBOM so we have richer descriptions for SCA tools to know what to look for, find known vulnerabilities. But what about where are some of those hiccups along the way, or where some of the adoption maybe isn't as fast as we would like it to see? Is it actually in the creation of SBOMs and we don't have good enough standards or good enough tooling for individual package maintainers to generate them, or is it more on the consuming side, the SCA side, where we just don't have enough organizations running and looking for those known vulnerabilities within these packages?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think some security tool sets like DAST, for example, when you're doing a web vulnerability scan, it's a little simpler from the perspective of that it's tech agnostic, right? When you get to SCA, one, I don't think people are quite as familiar with what that is, even though it's not particularly complicated, but the vernacular of the industry just doesn't seem to be quite the buzz behind it, but it is more tech specific, right? So if you're going to generate an SBOM, a tool that's going to do that for you needs to know certain things about your software. Most of it's kind of project metadata, right? Modern solutions tend to rely on things like package managers to help pull that together. But it is a little bit trickier. And some of the, I think some of the hesitation for people to use these tools is when they do figure out, oh, okay, I could use this vendor's tool to do it. We're kind of back to some of the accessibility discussions. It's like, well, we're a really small business, but in order to get a tool that works for us to generate an SBOM, and keep in mind, generating the SBOM is sort of the last stop. There's a lot of other value you get before that point, but regardless, to have access to these tools, like we're just not ready yet. We can't afford the big price tag, or we don't need, there's a lot of shelfware perhaps with some of these commercial off-the-shelf applications that help you do it. And there are open source ones again, but going back to the accessibility discussion, it also needs to be really simple to use. And so if you don't have someone in the org with that set of capabilities, it could be a little bit trickier to get something set up in a reliable way that runs on every build, that is presenting the information in an actionable way to your engineers and to some of the other people that care in your business to look at, well, how do we stand from a security perspective? What known vulnerabilities are we including, potentially deploying to our customers, and so forth?
I think I always like to pick up on those aspects of, especially actionable information. How do you get something how do you influence someone to take meaningful action, which I think you mentioned there, as well as the metric side of things, which maybe you said the simplest one, sort of how are we doing security wise, which is a bit open-ended, and it's not necessarily easily quantifiable in that how are we doing formulation. But so I'm curious if you do have different ways that you've learned or that you've seen the tool or processes around the tool to initiate action, meaningful action better, or for that matter, just what does a good dashboard look like? How are we doing? Can that be a happy face versus sad face, or do you need to get something more quantitative in there, or just a different dashboard with fancy graphics on it?
Yeah, I mean, so there's kind of two approaches. A dashboard is one way, and I think there's a lot of power in those because you can start to do things like gamify doing a better job, remediating vulnerabilities. I think that definitely works, and it doesn't even have to be a beautiful user experience. I'll use an example, and if someone that works for this company is listening, this isn't a criticism. I think LastPass, it's not the most beautiful UI, but it gets my attention. It makes sure I'm looking through their list and saying, oh, I actually reused a password somewhere. I'm going to go fix that. They kind of give you a score and they show you how you're doing. For SCA, I think that's one aspect, is making it clear what you could be fixing, having an understanding of the severity, making it easy to look at something and say, well, this looks really serious, but actually for this library, we don't even use the vulnerable part of that package. So to be able to suppress the noise, in the future, I think the VEX capability is going to be more impactful. And that's like a companion to an SBOM where you can say, hey, we're using this vulnerable piece of software, but we can certify that we're not affected by the vulnerability. But, dashboards, just one piece of it. And I think there's a certain persona that wants to be in a dashboard, maybe someone less technical. If you talk to our technical users, what they want is they want as much actionable information as possible coming out of their build system, for example. A lot of our customers, that's how they're going to use it. They're going to plug it into their CI/CD. Mm-hmm. It's not the only way you can integrate. You can connect right to GitHub. But if you're a slightly bigger organization, you're using something to help you manage that build and deploy process. And hey, I have the fail on build setting turned on. My build just failed. Why did it fail? Oh, it's a new vulnerability. Where can I get information? If I don't have to go into a dashboard, I can either just say, oh, geez, someone just included this dependency that we don't want. And you don't even have to leave your kind of developer-friendly environment. That's helpful too. So I think the audience is part of the discussion about what's the most valuable. And then once you're in one of those dashboards, I think it's just kind of getting out of your way and helping you do your job. It's going to come down to a gut decision. It's somebody's judgment call, be that a technical person or a product manager, to say, okay, I understand the importance of this. We're going to find time to fix it in the next sprint or whatever, however you're working your methodology for creating a product.
So especially that the aspect of personas, there is, as you mentioned, the persona of I'm the developer fixing code. And so the question that comes to me is, do I really have to fix this? Because maybe I don't have something as simple as the just approve a merge from a Dependabot, and so it's you don't even have to bother thinking about that, because you know that the merge is going to the request is going to merge easily. Your unit tests are going to go fine, and there's not going to be regressions. But other cases, it may just be this is now the 1000th report I've gotten in, and I don't have a time to fix them all. So have you seen ways of making that user experience or helping that persona out, or a piece of metadata within the SBOM that says, here's maybe why you don't need to worry about fixing this particular vuln, or here's really why you should? And I'm kind of getting to more than just something beyond a CVSS score. It's crossing my fingers and kind of hoping there's something more contextual with that, more helpful than just saying, yep, CVSS perfect 10, go fix it.
Maybe there is. I do think there's a certain point, it's just like with your house or with your car, right? Every day you're trying to figure out, like, well, where do I need to focus my maintenance budget or my time budget to get something improved or fixed? And it's very hard to know. But that I think one of the things is, once this becomes a more commonplace discussion, like I think a lot of the times when we talk about cybersecurity, it's actually more from a retrofitting perspective, because these practices aren't just baked in. If you go back and look at, if you look at some DevOps reports, the Accelerate ones I like, those are usually very well done. You look at things like automated build systems. Almost everyone uses those, okay? And they tend to rank things by low, medium, high, and elite organizations. Across the board, 3/4 or more are using that type of a system. So if that were the case with security tooling, I think this would be a little bit of a different discussion, because people would have been tackling the problem consistently for some time, and we're not there yet. If I go back to that same report, the Accelerate, I think it was the 2019 one. I can get a link for you all after this. But the number of elite organizations, they do a pretty big pool of businesses that they survey. The number of elite organizations running automated security tests, that only came in at 30%. I mean, so there's a lot of room for expansion of that, even with the companies we sort of all look at and go, wow, they're really doing it, quote unquote, the right way. I don't know that I can give you the answer, though, to how do you pick which thing to focus on. I mean, with legacy software especially, it can be a challenge, and you may have a bit of a ticking time bomb, and it's like refactoring any legacy software. I think it's a matter of figuring out, do you need to abstract away a portion of it so you can fix some really concerning things, and the rest of your energy is going on the new major version of that product. It's perhaps right. All of that security has been thought of throughout its development, or what you're kind of stuck with is maybe beyond recovery, which is not to make it sound scary, but this is something that people need to take seriously and take responsibility for. Not just engineers, not just AppSec people, business people too. I think as an industry, we maybe could be helped by more of like a smoky bear approach. Only you can prevent cyber fires, because it really is everybody.
Right.
So I'm curious. I want to sort of take a step back from that. You were talking about dashboards a few minutes ago, and who in the company and the organization actually looks at dashboard versus the CLI or the CI/CD. What do you think about? What do you put in? How do you make it? In a dashboard, we can have red, green, flashy lights, and then, oh my God, fire, as you just said, the smoky reference. Is there something you think about doing in there that communicates that in a little more usable manner to the sort of the business people? I mean, I don't think I'd go as far as, at least right now, as saying, do you put a dollar amount on it? But like, how do you actually get them to go a little bit further than fire bad?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I would maybe think about it. Let's think about your testing program, right? Your QA team. Mm-hmm. There are some areas of your app that are always going to get more attention, and rightfully so, with every release. I would hope billing and things like user authentication, the login, that kind of stuff. Similarly, if you know that something that's leveraged in your billing pipeline is vulnerable, I would definitely spend more time there than something where, yeah, there's a vulnerability, but what is the potential loss of having that be exploited? Again, it gets tricky though. Like none of these big ones are typically one stop, right? There's somebody finds a way in, and then they hop between places in your application. So I do think awareness and optionality and how you're sharing that data. The dashboard's one way. GitHub has a dashboard. They have a security tab, pushing the data there through a serif format. That's powerful. Tools that do that, that's another way that people are used to looking at information that you can get in front of them. Publishing SBOMs, take the go ahead.
I'm thinking outside the box now, because it's sort of interesting to many of us. You guys use that phrase, democratizing security, and in democracy, we're all sort of voting together on hopefully who's going to become the direction we want to go. Would it possibly make sense to give the business side input on what should be being monitored, or what is important? So, I mean, like, you just listed off a few good things there, like, a billing system, your admin system. Frequently, what you'll find, especially in a more medium-sized company, is that the devs, they've got. Their job is, someone gave me this ticket, must write code and get it closed so my stats look good and I can move on to the next ticket. Would it possibly maybe make sense? I don't think I've seen this, so it might be interesting to have the business side actually say, these are the things which are important to us, and then that actually flows down both in a dashboard as well as also automatically prioritizing things for the devs.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a really interesting concept. I think the premise of having different persona-based dashboards that exists, the tools we work on has like a dev-focused view, a legal view, a security view, but maybe an application or program/product-focused view would be a great way to allow you to organize or namespace, so to speak, like the different pieces of your application, and let that product management persona be more engaged and involved and understand, oh, wait a minute, that's what this, because I hear you. I get sort of surprised by that sometimes too. Tell me what this means to the end user or to our product, and that's what I need to know to help make the right decision.
An interesting aspect of that is that, as you two have been talking, to a degree, you're describing threat modeling. But once again, I'm going to kind of preface this by saying threat modeling is one of those things that AppSec teams are always like, oh, we should do this. We should teach threat modeling to users. They should have threat modeling, and let's talk about STRIDE or DREAD or some other fancy acronym to manage it. But it seems to boil down to just what's the context of the app? What's the context of this particular workflow? Is it billing, auth? And if so, that's just something that likely has a higher security concern associated with it, a threat model, if you will. So maybe there's something there. And I don't know, Eric, in the discussions you've had with different customers, with these different personas that you've interacted with, have you seen ways that they do talk about the security context or the threat model, so to speak, that maybe isn't just money, because it can be hard to calculate this is the $1 million revenue, this is the $10,000 revenue workflow, except on Tuesdays when it spikes for some reason. Just trying to ask the open-ended question in the spirit of what might be some ways to just talk about threat modeling without using the word threat modeling with these, like with product managers, for example.
I think it seems to be a bit of a roundabout way that we get into those discussions. At the moment, people tend to be adopting these tools because of things like compliance, right? So, what you're saying, threat model, if you're talking about PCI compliance, they're going to have a lot of interest in how you're storing customer and card data if you're taking card payments. And their threat model is very much focused on that aspect of your business. I don't think I've had a preponderance of like great customer feedback where they've put it in those terms, but I do think it's usually, hey, we're going through an M&A, or we need to be compliant for XYZ, and that's what's driving them to do it. That at the moment is the impetus. And I think that's fine, okay, but I would love to see us create some sort of a catalyst that wasn't so much because, well, now we have to, or
right
in some of these terms that are just a little bit more because somebody told me to. I think everyone will start to see the value in this once they're more involved, sort of like the Agile manifesto. Like, we have to be a little more pragmatic about how to get people to take this stuff seriously. And at the moment, I feel like it's a world of dogma. It's an executive order, or it's because my boss told me, or it's because this guy I know just went through a breach and it's a nightmare, but which are all reasons to maybe change your behavior. But I think as an industry, we can be a little more proactive, just trying to get in front of it, be it Smokey the Bear or whatever else. I mean, to me, this is a SCA DAST. A lot of these tools, these are like the seatbelts of the business. They're not hard to use. They don't have to be expensive. They should be core capabilities of anyone's program. And maybe you don't have 20 airbags in your car, but you got to have at least that. I mean, and of course, there's no choice now, but there was a time when that wasn't the case. So we have to remember that.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the way I hear that is the aspect of, sure, we can have catalysts such as there's a big breach or there's a compliance requirement or, something else, catastrophe like that leading to our catalyst. But that doesn't necessarily, a catalyst like that doesn't necessarily lead to a process that's ongoing, that's sustainable, that's going to be around for 1 year, let alone 5 or even 10, that you really need this type of basic democratized security practice. So maybe touching just real quick on the aspect of how do you have this be a sustainable process? We haven't really talked about some of the mechanisms behind just what does it look like from the tooling perspective to make this easier to consume or easier to deploy, so that engineers are just saying, well, okay, this is something that is easy as a part of our automated build system, or here's something else that's just really easy to deploy or easy to consume the information. Just curious, are there certain lessons learned along the way that you've really just emphasized on to make that more amenable to being a process that's going to live long past that initial catastrophizing catalyst?
Yeah, I mean, I don't get to watch much Netflix these days, and this seems like it's not related, but I promise I'll bring it back.
Sounds good.
I didn't even have my subscription ended. We got little kids, so people are talking about Squid Games. So the other day I said, "What happened to that? That was like a week. That's all I heard, and now it's gone." The kind of hype cycles are so intense, and the cycles, the frequency is very quick. That's the events, right? The catalyst we were just talking about. That's the Log4j or Okta, or pick your breach of the week. Mm-hmm. How do you get that to be more? What's the more optimistic way of saying endemic, like baked into it's just going to be there forever. You're always going to be looking at security. I think it goes back to the fundamental things we talked about is step one, make it accessible to everybody, make tools, I think the enterprise model has its place, but ultimately the world of cyber kind of bifurcates into stuff that everyone can afford and stuff that's really niche and very specialized for people that have lots of money. But every business, be they big or small, needs to be able to have access to these tools and do something, like start doing this. If you learn about it, I think it's less scary and you'll have a better understanding of your business and what you're relying on. And you'll embrace it because you'll say, gee, I'm glad nothing happened. And we now know that. And what can we do differently? That's a big part of it. I mean, you want to learn to play guitar, get a guitar and start playing it. It's the only, you can watch people do it on YouTube all day and you will learn some things, but you have to put this stuff to practice.
Absolutely. And I think what you were just saying there at the end too, about did we know about it? A lot of this is just minimizing surprise. Let's not be surprised because we had the SBOM and SCA that we could analyze and just look at. We had the nasty catalyst of the vulnerability, but we knew about it. We were able to find all of the places, or at least our understanding of coverage was with high confidence. So it's sort of in that spirit of trying to avoid surprise or having an optimistic vision of the future, which maybe Squid Games was slightly more pessimistic. What's a positive note, or what's something that you would sort of have as a call to action for our listeners, or something that they should be on the lookout for over the next couple months of 2022?
Yeah. I mean, watch the space, the better tools, more options are there. I didn't actually see Squid Game, so I feel bad referencing it, but like if I go 80s movie, Trading Places, Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy, and what's her name? I don't remember, but the thing that sticks in my head is the kind of punchline is they're learning how to trade commodities, frozen concentrated orange juice. Like these things are coming for you to be able to use. Anyone, this is not going to be quite so niche. So keep an eye out for that. And I think we do need to dispel a couple of misconceptions. Your audience, I have to presume, is pretty sophisticated. Certainly, Mike and John, you have a lot of experience here. Not everyone does, and there's a lot of misconceptions. We've heard things from customers saying, hey, you're telling me we have this dependency deep in our dependency tree. We're skeptical of what you found. In one case, it was a Microsoft library, and they said, common sense tells me that a big company like Microsoft wouldn't include a library with known vulnerabilities. Well, I think you're incorrect. They do, and it's not intentional. Maybe they included that, and there's new vulnerabilities we just learned about, but this stuff is there. It's happening all the time, big or small. It's not necessarily a blame game. It's the reality of the world we live in, and you have to be prepared to meet that demand. And frozen concentrated orange juice is pretty good, and it can help you solve a lot of problems. So I think keep your eyes open for more and more tools that solve these problems.
That sounds wonderful. I think I'm trying to figure out which side I'm going to bet on for frozen concentrated SBOMs, and if I want $1 that will have it network effect by the end of 2022, or we'll still have, unfortunately, this same conversation and still encouraging people to adopt it. So we'll see. Maybe we'll have to have you back on, Eric, to collect on that bet once I figure out which side I want to go.
That would be good. Yeah, I forgot about the bet aspect, but of course that's the punchline. Yep.
Well, we didn't forget about talking about SCA, SBOMs, the importance of democratizing security to make it possible for just everyone to be able to understand as well as use these tools. So, Eric, I want to thank you for bringing that message to us this week.
Thank you very much for having me.
Also want to thank John for joining us and everyone who's been listening. To learn more about SOOS, visit securityweekly.com/SOOS, SOOS. We'll take a quick break now and return with News of the Week.